of a generation of tools. It's really built to make cybersecurity easier. Welcome back to another episode of the MSP Cyber Roundtable. I have with me today Dinesh Mehn. We're going to be spending the day talking about penetration testing. This is actually the first part of a two-part series. Today is going to be about networks, endpoints, and perimeter testing. Before I get into that, welcome to the show, Dinesh, and thanks for joining.
Yep. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for arranging this. It's really so much of fun talking to you on the various cybersecurity work that we guys are doing together. And I think I'm really excited to talk about penetration testing because this is something which is very close to my heart and what we do as an organization. So really, thank you. Thanks a lot.
You know, we're going to get more into the specific type of penetration testing that you guys do later in the show, but I want to say that I don't always give the concept of penetration testing a fair showing with my audience, my listeners. I pick on it a little bit because penetration testing as a word is sometimes misused, and it means different things to different people. But I love the area you're in because you're in that space of higher rigor testing with a real assurance process, which is really the intent behind a penetration test is when you're looking for rigor of security processes and to test the security that's in place, you go through this formalized penetration test, and then you use that to support the assurance process. And I love that. And it's what you do when you're already operating a cybersecurity program and you really need to prove it. But the reason I sometimes pick on it is there's people out there that are doing nothing of that sort, and they're calling it penetration testing, right? They're doing just automated vulnerability scans, right? And the reports are garbage, and the conclusions are questionable. There's insurance companies that are scanning sometimes. The brokerages are scanning, producing these like garbage reports with like the pretty graphics on them that like mean nothing. They like scanned your GoDaddy instance or whatever to demonstrate that they've done a penetration test or something like that. I want to both commiserate with you on the world that sells snake oil penetration tests, and I know you guys are the real deal, right? But also apologize because I sometimes make fun of the penetration testing word because of that. But I do respect the high rigor processes that you guys are in, and it's a real necessity. So you're in this testing world. We're going to talk more about penetration testing. We're going to talk more about your company and what you're doing right now today. But I'm curious, how did you get into the world of testing, and like when did you get into technology? When did technology become security? When did security become we're going to do rigorous certified tests? I'm curious what that journey looked like.
Oh man, that's a great question. I think I need to go back a little bit into the past.
Yeah, go
And
back 30 years, man.
yep, absolutely. I wouldn't say 30 years, but it would be something around 25 years. So last 25 to 27 years, I've been in the IT industry. And within this industry, I have played multiple roles. In fact, one of the early areas where I worked in was more related to quality and specifically with the manufacturing companies in the automotive industry. So I got a lot of insight into how these industries operate, how do they manufacture the automobile components, where you really need a lot of quality, because just imagine if there is no quality, or the quality is bad, where you are trying to press a, or you're trying to apply a brake and the brake doesn't work, what happens?
Yeah.
So many
But
lives.
you go off the road.
Go off the road, you hit somebody, you take off somebody's life. So there's so many things that can happen if the automobile component doesn't work properly. So that's where I understood the importance of quality, and importance of systems to deliver a quality product. After that, I got into the IT industry, and within the IT industry, I was working on multiple different programs, projects. So in fact, I handled a functional testing team for a product, where we had a team of 100 people. Uh, we had to manage the complete quality of the product, and this was a clinical product. So we had to have rigorous testing done, so that we have the right product shipped out to the hospitals as such. And that's where again I got into quality and testing. After
Hmm.
that, then my journey started getting into infrastructure. I got into vendor management operations. I'm a certified master black belt from GE. I'm a certified black belt, a certified green belt. So we have done multiple programs to reduce cost, to improve security, to improve compliance, to improve the risk controls and so on. Worked on the ERP side, the non-ERP side, IT asset management, infrastructure. So working with GE for close to around 15 years, I got a wealth of information, wealth of knowledge, wealth of wisdom across how large organizations run. And even while we were in GE, we always used to have challenges on the IT asset management side, on the IT security, compliance, so on and so forth. And we were always trying to bridge the gap. And always when we used to see the gap was always wider and wider. So we always
Hmm.
thought that we are shrinking it, but it always got wider and wider. And then coming out of GE, I stepped out of GE, and we started delivering solutions in the IT asset management space. Because what we have observed is most of the organizations, they don't even have a proper inventory of their assets, leave alone the security of those assets. And when we talk about assets, we are talking about hardware assets, we are talking about servers, we are talking about laptops and various other uh, clouds assets, applications, so on and so forth. All these come as part of asset management. So when we looked at the asset management, we found that companies don't even have a proper inventory. They don't know who is using, what is he using for, why it is enabled, what are the configurations. And when we started giving these solutions, so these guys came back and said, hey, you guys are doing asset management, why don't you do asset security? We said,
Hmm.
okay. So they introduced us. In fact, they are the ones, our customers are the ones who pushed us into the security space. And they said that we have to do security on an asset. So if you're already doing asset management, that you have done half of the work, that you have the proper inventory, you know all these things, then why don't you help us with improving the security posture? So when they said improving the security posture, the first question was, what's my current security posture? So that is where we started getting into understanding how we can get the IT security posture of any organization. Even if we want to build up a cybersecurity plan for an organization, how do we do that? The first and foremost thing is, where am I, or what is my current posture?
Hmm.
I need to understand. If you don't know where you are, you can never plan to go where you want to go. So you need to know where you are first. And then we started doing a lot of these assessments. As part of these assessments, we got introduced to the various pen tests, the various type of tools that are available in the market that we can use for finding these assessments. And when we started getting deep into the assessments, we found that there were multiple tools. There were multiple tools that were available in the market. Not everybody knows which is the right tool, which is the best tool, why it is the right tool, why it's the best tool. They used to use some or the other tool, get some information, take that information and start building their as is process or understanding what their current security posture is all about. But when they were halfway done, they figured out that, oh, we missed something. We need to again go back. So the projects were getting delayed, programs were getting delayed. They were unnecessarily spending money. They were putting more money behind the shiny objects in the market that used to get sold to them. And then they used to find after a couple of months that, oh, this was not the product that we should have bought. We should have bought something else. So this created a lot of chaos within the organizations, and they were unable to meet their security targets, the various goals that they had from a controllership standpoint, from a compliance standpoint. And that's where we started figuring out what is the best way we can help our customers. And we as we started doing that, we didn't knew when, but we set up our own lab. So we set up our own lab with various tools, giving various information, and then we started using these various tools for our customers. We started doing a lot of tests,
Mm-hmm.
assessments, and gradually, as we matured, we saw that we are now the ISO 17025 accredited IT security testing lab.
Now, I want to. So you used a lot of jargon there. I want to slow down a little bit, and I want to go all the way back to the automotive, right? When you were doing quality testing, were you using ISO 9000 processes at the beginning of your career, or yeah?
Yep.
Okay.
So, in fact, ISO 9000 was a standard process for all industries. For
Yep.
the automotive industry, there was a specific standard which was known as QS 9000.
Okay.
So,
So, well, but that I would just want to point out that there's unlike cybersecurity, when it comes to process quality, right? There's not a lot of competing quality standards out there. So ISO 27000, or sorry, ISO 9000 is the basically the gold standard there for measuring quality, and the whole world's gotten behind that. It's been a real cloud on the security side of the world agreeing that there needs to be a standard, but no one agreeing on what the standard should be for security. So if you look at architectural standards, which is usually what we assess against, right? There are many, many, many standards out there, and I think the world has and the information security specialists like me have sort of come to an understanding of, oh, when you're in this situation, this is the right standard to use, and that's emerging, and there's an increasing understanding from business owners to really take that leadership from their infosec advisors and cyber advisory partners, that hey, there's specific standards for specific situations. But on the security testing side, I think again we don't have that clarity. There is the ISO, it's 17,000 series, is it?
yep,
For security testing, and it's actually not a security testing standard. There's a specialization in there for security testing, but it's for any type of laboratory processes. Is that right?
yep. It's a
Um, yeah. So I want to point this out, that this is basically laboratory science, okay? And that's what makes a formalized, rigorous assessment process different from I ran a random scanner with a debatable quality and got a random report over a random whatever it was. Here's some pieces of paper, customer, here's a pen test. There's the difference between that and we went through a rigorous process to test very specific things and evidence them, right? And that's really the space you're operating in, right? So I totally believe in that mission. In Fort Mesa, we have this escalating maturity model where the first thing we advise people towards is to set a goal for security implementations. And then from there, you either enforce uh, or you automate them to improve that control maturity. And from there, you measure or you report on them. But the top of the maturity scale is that testing. And if you're not testing your controls, right, you can never reach the top of the maturity scale. But also, if you're not testing your controls, you actually have no idea if anything you've been working on is working. And that's really important to point out here. That's the reason why we do penetration tests. But there's many different types. There's many different things to test. Today we're talking about networks, endpoints, and perimeter. So just to break those down into their component parts, I guess and these definitions can sometimes be vague because the technology keeps changing, right? What's a network? What's an endpoint? What's a perimeter? These are actually definitions that don't stay still. But I think right now for networks, we're talking about the connective infrastructure that connects you to the outside telecom networks, or the connective infrastructure that connects machines together, right? Physical machines, or when we talk about endpoints, we're talking usually about things we can touch, right? But not always, because there's virtual endpoints in the cloud, right? It's anything with an operating system, and it's many things that don't have configurable operating systems. So it's anything that's a device, anything that's got a virtual container, anything that's configurable, right? That can run software. And then we've got this idea of a perimeter, which I'm going to look for your help there, because there's so many different types of perimeter. So I'm not even sure what the useful definition is for you. It used to be, well, the edge of my building is where the internet is, and outside my building is the outside, and inside my building is the inside, and it doesn't work that way anymore. So I'm curious how you measure perimeter. Talk to me about how you define this from the perspective of you're going into these rigorous tests. You have to have very clear definitions of these things, right? So where do those definitions start and stop?
So let me start with the perimeter. So now we have the LANs, we have the WANs, we have different types of connectivity, and the organizations themselves are pretty much connected through various sort of technologies. So in our when we do our specific tests, we mention that anything which is after the firewall and inside. So
Mm-hmm.
when you have a cable, an internet cable coming in, it gets into the firewall, then it starts getting inside. That's where we say your perimeter starts. That's how we.
What if there's no firewall?
Oh, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. In
Well,
fact,
it's a question that 3 years ago I wouldn't have asked, but right now I'm asking because I'm seeing network device companies selling new classes of devices that they no longer call firewalls. They're
right.
just the thing that sits at the edge of your physical network between you and the internet provider, but they're no longer calling it a firewall, and it might not even block traffic. That might not even be its job, although it sometimes is.
Yeah.
So what's a firewall is like, are you I mean, I know that there's the old definition of it's the black magical box that holds the bad guys out, but is that something that you're struggling to define in 2025?
So so that's exactly the challenge, because like you said, the technology keeps changing, but still we have to have some sort of definition for it. So whether you have a firewall or not, any device where your internet is getting connected, we say that's your perimeter, and from there
Mm-hmm.
it starts off. You may have a firewall, you may not have a firewall, but what we recommend is whichever shape or form. It could be a virtual firewall, it could be a firewall which is on prem, anything. Have something which at least tells you that there is a bad guy who's coming in. He may not stop it, or he
Mm-hmm.
may just say, let him come in, whatever it is, but at least have a tracking. Because most of the time it so happens, people don't even have the visibility, leave alone whether he's a good or a bad. So whatever device you use, whatever the name could be, because we see a lot of new devices coming in, a lot of new jargons coming in, two products are
Mm-hmm.
getting merged, a new product is getting evolved. All these things are happening. But the core, you want to know who is coming into your building. That's the first thing that you need to do.
So, presuming you have a physical office in 2025, the perimeter is the edge of that physical space, right? The I'm curious though, just because it is 2025. Some companies don't even have
Physical
uh,
place.
a physical center of gravity anymore, and their networks extend to people's houses and houses that they have no control over. They share with other people, right? And so, the new perimeter really is around identity governance and access to applications. And so, it's not that the perimeter no longer exists; it's that it's a little bit more abstract. It's becoming more abstract. I'm curious if you've run into. I think to the extent that people are ordering pen tests, they usually do have a physical office. But I think that that's changing. And I'm curious if you run into engagements where there's literally no outside or inside at all because they don't have anything, right? They don't have an office.
They don't have an office, but the office is shifted in the form of a server in a central location. And
Right.
these central location, whoever wants to access, they still access it through some sort of a VPN or some sort of a connection which authorizes him or her to get into the network to start working on it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you see BYOD, people like you said, sharing networks at home, but when they have to work on something which is confidential, something which
Hmm.
is very important, they have to log into the network. In fact, we have seen a lot of organizations where lot of at least 30 to 40% of the applications you can use it right over internet from your machine itself, but there are certain applications which are behind the firewall for which they have to go through the VPN as such. So that sort of a demarcation has now led to a new word which is known as attack surface.
Oh yeah. That's I think a better description for the layer that exists between the outside and the inside. But unfortunately, the attack surface is everywhere, right? Because it's in your web browser. It's wrapped around your phone. It's it's where you're connecting into Wi-Fi with your laptop at your house, right? So but all those places matter, right?
Yep. So the first and the foremost thing is finding your attack surface, and the attack surface is changing very fast. What was
Yeah,
my attack surface 1 month back may not be the same today,
yeah.
because I might have opened up some more applications on the internet, or I might have restricted some of the applications. So my attack surface keeps changing. My BYOD devices are again my attack surface.
Hmm.
Am I using a BYOD device, or am I using my own device, which is a bit more secured, a bit more controlled? So, how do I want to give that risk parameters for my organization also determines this. Like, I'll give you an example. The other day, I was talking to one of the CPAs. He said he has close to around 20 people who come to his office and work, and they work on a BYOD device. He doesn't have any control on those devices. So I asked him, "What's your control?" He said, "These guys come to my office or wherever they are working from. They get into the cloud, they do the work there, they store the work there. That's all he has security, nothing else.
Hmm.
Nothing else." And I told him, "You are sitting on a time bomb."
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, but I think that bring your own device is it's not going to go away.
Yep.
So from a perspective of pragmatism, right? There's ways of dealing with it, and there's ways that are going to be created in the future to deal with it more effectively. Because I think BYOD is not going to go away. It's going to be harder and harder to ignore, and so you have to put controls in place, and you need to put hygiene controls on those BYOD devices. You need to put hygiene controls on the identity and the application, and you don't have to have control of a device to make sure that it is sanitized, right? To access an application, you can tell someone, look, you need to have this thing on your phone which doesn't give us control of it, but simply tells us whether it's safe right now for for us to allow you in. and that I think that's the new network edge, right? Uh, and it's gonna and it doesn't really matter if it's a BYOD device or it's a company device. The reality is, even a company device, it's out there in the field. It's left in the back of Ubers. It's sitting in people's home offices, where their teenagers or strangers have access to it, right? They're left in hotel rooms on conference room tables. Like these devices are out there. They're not they're not they're not magically secure just because they're owned by the company, right?
Yep. They're not secured, but at least they have a more control than a BYOD device. At least they have some sort of a software which helps it encrypt the data, so that only when you have your passwords, the data gets you get to access the data. But whereas in a BYOD, I've not seen anybody encrypting or anybody having a software to encrypt, so that when they log in, it gets decrypted and so on. A lot of
No, but
BYOD devices don't even have antivirus.
but we have BYOD in our mobile policy at Fort Mesa, but for certain types of accounts anyway. But you can't use a device if it doesn't have a hygiene agent that sees that there's a password of a certain type of complexity and there's device encryption in place. So you can enforce those policies even if you're not taking control. And what you do is you just say, well, the company information is going to be erased from that device, and or you're not even going to be able to access the network at all if you don't comply with X, Y, and Z.
Right.
So I think that they're, as consumers become more and more privacy conscious, or in some cases more permissive, but knowledgeable about these things that can exist in their devices, the knowledge workforce becomes more technically adept. They are taking control of these things, and that local hygiene stuff. But we still need to look over their shoulders increasingly, right? So I guess we sort of drifted into endpoints, and we just mentioned BYOD. Like usually, what we're talking about is mobile phones. Hopefully, not whole laptops connecting to VPNs. But there's phones. There's clearly tablets. There's laptops. What else are we talking about these days when we talk about endpoints?
Oh, you have your lot of iPads, which you are getting connected to, your Surface devices. So
Hmm.
all these devices, we take them as endpoints. In fact, there are a lot of endpoints which are Dell products, which don't even have a huge hard disk in it. So we cannot install a lot of software on it. So even those are taken as endpoints as such.
Yeah. So you've got thin clients. You've got. I think of things like time clocks,
Yep.
or like the enterprise grade IoT infrastructure, right? There's all sorts of things that connect into the network that are they're endpoints because they're not part of the network itself, right? They connect to the network,
Yep.
and it could be anything. But
Yep.
increasingly, we're also talking about things in the cloud that it gets real nebulous. What's an endpoint in the cloud? But if it's running if it's running a piece of software that you put there, and you're managing it, and you've got a responsibility, and it's got an operating system, and you can log into it, I think that's an endpoint too. Um,
That's an asset. That's an asset
yeah,
sitting exactly. So
yeah,
when we started off the discussion, we talked about IT assets. So
yeah,
organizations don't even have an inventory of their IT assets.
yeah,
So if you cannot see them, you cannot secure them. That's what we say: see it to secure it.
yeah. And then there's the networks, which I don't think people struggle to understand what a network is, but just as a reminder, it also includes cellular networks. It also includes things that we don't normally think of as internet networks, like Zigbee and Bluetooth, and there's other potential entry points into your network that might need to be considered. Um, so how do analyzing that space, what is I mean, you have to break this down to create a rigorous, repeatable assurance process, right? You have to have a methodology. How do you go about even categorizing your tests and moving through a process on that? What what do people do wrong, right? And what when they approach that type of thing, and what do you do to resolve that to make it rigorous?
So here, first thing, like we discussed, we define what's an endpoint, what's a network, and what's a perimeter, and then we have different tools there where we scan and get the base information. And the
Hmm.
base information itself is so bad in organizations that they say, oh man, I was really vulnerable to this extent. I never thought. Ports are opened,
Hmm.
services are running, the passwords are just admin. You wouldn't believe we went for a network testing for one of the organizations, and their passwords were written on a piece of paper and they were stuck in front of the system administrator.
Yep.
It was so easy. So my guys went there, they just went in, they got into the network, they did everything, and they said you are vulnerable. This guy's like, why we are vulnerable? We are this, that. He said, see, that's where your passwords are. And that was a shocker for them because they thought if I've written down the passwords, it's easy, everybody can see and they can operate so that my business keeps running. But they didn't understand that somebody who comes in, he takes a picture and he just goes away and he can sabotage your entire network.
Yeah, and I've seen passwords written down in some really bad places. And the post-it note or like under the keyboard is like the obvious one. But I've found them in company policy documentation. I've found them in employee onboarding guides. I've found them really all over the place. People leave those trails, and attackers know those obvious places to look, right? And they find them. They find them.
And one other thing, people use the password, if you see, admin and then the password. So the user ID, everybody knows it. So he needs to just use a brute force for maybe 15-20 minutes and he can get the password. So
Yeah,
we suggest that you also change the user IDs. Don't always have admin. And the common user ID password that we have seen, admin, out of 100 times, 60 times it would work. So 60%
yes.
of people have admin or admin123 or admin321, admin at the rate 123. You just try this, things will open up.
So I know that in our guidelines in any number of security standards that we advise people, we talk about things like dedicated admin accounts, which implies not only are we not we're not using that default account at all, right? That default account should be entirely disabled or removed. But when you do have an admin account, it's attached to a specific person, and it's separate from their normal account, and that way you can control them individually. The attacker can't guess it to the extent that someone's identity might be leaked because they're just normal humans. That admin user is hopefully not leaked at the same level of it's not as easy to leak that if you only use it once a month on a special machine, right? Use a dedicated workstation for that purpose. So there's lots of things you can do to protect that type of thing. I'm curious, how do you go about? Is this do you have a long list of tests you run? Are the tests custom designed on the basis of an organization's security architecture? What's your usual mode of operation there?
So the usual mode of operation is first we would go and scan the network, scan the endpoints, and then we give them a report that these are the areas that you are vulnerable. First, correct these areas, and then we would come and do the next level of test. Because if you are failing your first level of test itself, even if you do the second level of test, it will be bad, it will be worse. So
Hmm.
we give them time. So they go in and they prepare themselves. Now they know how we are going to come and test. So they start putting in more controls. And then after 2 months or 1.5 months, they invite us again and say, okay, now we are better. Now you come and test us. So then we start the base test again, and then we slowly move up the ladder. Because if they are dead the first time, we cannot keep beating them because we know they are already dead. So
So I understand your general engagement model is to pair the level of rigor of the testing that you're bringing into place to the level of rigor in the defensive operations. And if they're only here on their defensive operations, really the focus should be on achieving the next level of rigor, which I think it's really important to point out. It's one of the ways. It's one of the most common ways I see people um, uh, misinvest in cybersecurity. You see it a different ways. So I think we work with a lot of MSPs and service providers that are worried about their customers not investing enough in cybersecurity, and I see that. But frequently, I see that they are actually spending in the range of effectiveness from a dollars perspective. But what they're missing in deficiencies, or what they're deficient in, tends to be that they've overinvested in some things, underinvested in other things. So they're not putting the investment in dollars in the place that's highest return on investment. And when you bring rigor into cybersecurity, what you're doing is you're really optimizing for return on investment. And so focusing someone on, okay, you've never done a pen test before, you have no formalized security architecture, let's just take a little look here and give you some guidelines, is a great place to start before you pay for someone to go and do comprehensive controls testing or some kind of red teaming exercise. Um, is there what are the circumstances that usually lead organizations to sort of raise their hand and um, and then continue into a penetration test engagement? When should they not do that? When are they ready for that? Um, are there some you should get a pen test when guidance that you want to issue here?
okay, a pen test has to be a regular activity. I would give a simple analogy. It's like your human body. The you do regular health checkup for yourself. Why do you want to do this health checkups? You want to know where I am bad, where I am good. If I'm bad at something, I want to improvise on it. Otherwise, you don't have a reason to improve, or else
Mhm.
you don't know where to improve on. Maybe your cholesterol levels are high, but you are not eating sugar. So it doesn't make sense. So the same happens on the security side also. If you keep doing these tests, you keep understanding where the flaws are.
Mhm.
And the big thing is developers or founders or companies think we don't have any flaws till you get breached. So our recommendation to organizations is have this as a regular activity, at least a quarter. Like first quarter, you might do a network pen test, second quarter, do a endpoint, third quarter, do a application. So at least if you keep doing this, you keep going through this cycle, the churn. And also, when you look at the intruders, they would come through all these means. So he would get into the perimeter, he'll get into the endpoint, he'll get into the app, he'll get into the database. So he works vertically and horizontally. So if you keep doing these, so it's like one step at a time. You have your network done, you have your endpoint done, you have your perimeter, go for your app, then again come for the network, then again come for your perimeter. So you keep doing this on a regular basis. The organization matures, the people working there understand that security is important, and then the CISO is confident where I am strong and where I am weak.
Now, when you say CISO, you just use a technical term there, and I think people think they know what CISO means, but I want to define this for a moment. So, um, we're talking about the information security officer. This is someone who has a role with accountability to oversee a cybersecurity program. There's some legal and regulatory implications to taking on that role, but the most important thing is that your organization has one. I think that there's some discussion out there along the lines of the skill set that a CISO should have, but I want to point out here that many organizations don't have someone they would consider to be a skilled security architect, but that does not mean that they shouldn't have a CISO. That I think the most important qualification of a CISO or an ISO, and the difference being if you have a large organization, you might have more than one security officer, but for most organizations, you have one wholly accountable person for that program. So they'd be a CISO. I think the most important qualification is that they care. That they care to be accountable. When they receive a report from a penetration tester, they care to follow up and make sure that resources have been assigned and that they're vigilant to make sure people are remediating or meeting a plan of actions. And they care to even bring the penetration tester in to begin with and to repeat that exercise. So I just wanted to point that out because a lot of organizations don't have someone that they would consider to be the CISO. They haven't bothered to appoint someone. But I want to assure people of two things. A, all you have to do is care, and so a CEO can do that if they have to. If they don't have someone that they can delegate that to. Um, but the second thing is you really, really have to do it. If you don't assign someone to be accountable to cybersecurity, you're not meeting your requirements as an organization. In to the extent that people have insured you, they might deny a claim. To the extent that you're subject to regulatory action, you might not be meeting your regulatory requirements. So I just wanted to do a little public service announcement on that word you used. But okay, so the CISO, whoever's been assigned that, like they're the official person that receives the report, right? And what are you seeing people do with those things? Hopefully, they're not just sitting on them or letting them collect dust, but they bring them to their team. Hopefully, right?
Yep. So they bring it to the team and they start fixing it. And the beauty about this regular activity is when you have an outside person looking at your systems and giving you a report, you tend to take it seriously and you start working on it so that next time you don't get the same issues. You might get some new issues, that's okay, but at least the old issues are closed. And that's the only way you will know your vulnerabilities, you will know your weaknesses, and you will be able to get a good night's sleep. Otherwise, most of the people or most of the CISOs or whoever is responsible for information security, they don't even know what their vulnerabilities are. That's the biggest problem.
So that sounds like a positive response that someone could be making, and that's the whole point of having an ISO or a CISO is that there's someone to be accountable. Because if there's not a specific person that's accountable, then there's not a specific person that should be concerned with being negligent, right? It is reasonable to make errors. It is reasonable to have vulnerabilities. All organizations have vulnerabilities. Even organizations that are doing a really great job on security have vulnerabilities. What's not reasonable is to be told by an outsider, hey, you have this big problem to solve. Here it is. 12 months goes by, you haven't made a dent on it, right? If your accountant gave you advice and said you're out of tax compliance and you didn't solve it for a full year, guess what? Right? The government might have something to say about that, right? And the same thing's true here in cyber, although at least in the US, it's not always the government that's the one holding you accountable. It's your customers, sometimes your vendors, regulators in some cases. But the most frequent one I see is insurers are the ones holding people accountable.
In fact, the biggest challenge that I see is if you get breached, getting the business back up to it on its
Yeah.
feet, it is really time consuming, it's painful, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to go through it.
Yeah, well, you certainly don't want to go through it without a plan to deal with mitigating the loss, right? So if you have the right controls in place, even if someone um, takes advantage of a vulnerability, right, they shouldn't get very far
Right.
because from the moment that they're in that network, you should be able to detect that something that anomalous is going on, and you should be able to shed your organization of that risk of that intrusion before they really create damage, which actually is possible. Because despite the fact that we have attackers running billion-dollar criminal organizations with mechanized AI-driven attack patterns, it's still usually several weeks to several months between the time of that initial intrusion and when they're creating that loss event. So you've got this big opportunity, right, to detect and get rid of that loss before it occurs. But if you don't have the controls in place to detect that or to stop it to begin with, you're not going to know anything until that loss has impacted you, right? And so the security testing is really important to test those detections, to test your ability to respond, right? You really need someone poking you to see if you flinch properly.
Yep. In fact, the beauty about getting hacked is you don't know till the time you really know about it. You might be hacked 6 months before, but it's only today that you got to know because there was some issue that cropped up because of which you got to know about it. So,
Yeah,
like somebody pickpocketed your purse or a wallet, you would only know when you want to pay money next time. You say,
yeah.
"Oh, where's the wallet?" So you might have got the wallet might have got stolen maybe 1 hour before, but you never got to know about it.
So, are there uh, are there any interesting stories you want to share about a particular flaw that you thought was, I think the password ones are ones we understand as implementers. Our audience is mostly technical implementers. What are the types of flaws that you think are just really interesting when you run into them?
So I'll give you one example. In one of the examples, this was a SaaS application that we were doing the pen testing for, and we found close to around 38 bugs in that, or 38 vulnerabilities. And when we had these vulnerabilities, we discussed with the technical team, and they just wrote them off. They said, "Oh, this is a functional issue. This is this issue. This is that," and all 38 issues or vulnerabilities, they had something or the other to rub it off. And I had to pick up the phone and tell the CEO that, "Hey guys, we have a problem. Your team is not accepting the vulnerabilities. I want you to be there on the call when we discuss it next time." He said, "Okay, I'll be on the call." And you wouldn't believe all the 38 vulnerabilities got accepted and they got closed. So it's very important that the person who is accountable, to your point which you just said a few minutes back, accountability is very important in security. Otherwise, the development team is not accountable for security, they are accountable for delivery. The network team is not accountable for security, they are accountable for keeping the network up and running. The endpoint team is accountable for giving the endpoint or provisioning the endpoint in time so that there is no loss of time, or there is no loss of effort, or there is no loss of extra time. So the these different teams don't have security as a component in their accountability. If you add security as a component for all of them, things would become very different.
Well, yeah, I mean, we do engagements sometimes where we help people implement a software development lifecycle that brings security into their development processes, but it's not the norm right now. I know that there was a security product I was exposed to recently, a popular one, and I found a bug. I'm a security analyst. It's just like a occupational hazard that I sometimes run into security issues. It's not my day gig, but I am in security. And I thought that this bug was problematic enough that it was a big issue. It was a big issue. I took the time to analyze it and write it up and score it and submitted it not because I was looking for any kind of credit, but just because I thought this is something that really needs to be resolved. And the company that received it, uh, they closed it out. They said, "Oh, this is a functional issue. We've let the product team know it's actually a feature that you're talking about." And I thought to myself, wait. This is something that's exposed to the network, right? Yeah, it was an 8.5 CVSS. But I could see where that happens. So what are the secrets to getting the attention of those stakeholders that maybe they're abdicating their responsibility. They're not accountable. How do you make them feel accountable? I know it's not as simple as just telling them I found a bug.
Yep. So if you relate it to a number, a dollar value, the eyes pop out. Like for example, the CPA that I was talking about. I asked him, how many customers do you serve? He said, I serve close to around 30 to 50 customers on an average. I said, let's take an example. If one customer sues you for for whatever security, what is that you would be paying? He said, maybe a 1.5 to 2 mil is my exposure. I said, okay, fine. If that's the case, you are sitting on a exposure of 75 mil to 100 mil. I was like, what? I said, yes. Suppose five of your customers' data get leaked or whatever happens,
Yeah,
and they put a lawsuit on you, five of them.
yeah,
It's like 7.5. And that's only
yep.
the monetary cost. What's the cost of your agony, the mental health, going up and down, your business? Your business will get closed, boss. No questions asked. You will not be able to do business. It's like, what? I never thought about this. I said, yes, absolutely. You never thought because you thought everything has been going fine, everything is going fine, and everything will keep going fine. You don't even know that your data might be leaked 6 months back or 1 year back because you don't even have a control. He was like, oh, Dinesh, then what should I be doing? I said, okay, now if you want to do something, these are the steps that we need to take. Now we are working with him to improvise his process and puts this control slowly, day by day. One control a month, one control a month, one control a month. Because you cannot boil the ocean.
Well, Dinesh, before we leave today, I want to just take a moment here to I threw your brand up here. Uh, DigitoWorks in our marketplace. What that means is that they're one of the vendors that we recommend for organizations that need penetration testing. There's different types of penetration testing. Why don't you give us the quick pitch here, Dinesh? When should people reach out to you? When should they call you? Give us the elevator on DigitoWork.
So, any organization that has mobile applications, web applications, and they are going live or they are already live but they have not tested their applications, they want to know the security posture, they should come to us. Any founder who is going for funding and he's looking for a pen test result so that he can show that I have a product which is secured, which the private equity or the funders can fund for him, founders should be coming to us. Anyone SOC going for ISO 27001, SOC 2 certifications, all of these, they ask for pen testing results and they should be coming to us. And on the other side, organizations which are in the industry where there is a lot of heavy compliance, heavy regulation, they should keep doing the pen test regularly to understand what their risk posture is like. And from there, they can take the inputs and define their cybersecurity program as such.
All right. Well, people can find Dinesh's organization in our marketplace at fortmesa.com/marketplace or head on over to digitowork.com. Um, Now, next week, we are going over the cyber hygiene life cycle. I have some folks from Exidium, and we're going to be talking about some of the areas that they play in, but big emphasis on endpoint hygiene. Thank you so much for joining with us today, Dinesh. We've got another part two, coming in a few weeks. I can't wait to get you back on the show. Until then, enjoy your weekend, and thanks for the midnight conversation here.
Yep, right. Thank you very much, Matt. In fact, it was a pleasure talking to you today. Thank
All
you.
right,
Thanks.
bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.